The purpose of this assignment is to create a timeline in the Salish Sea. So the prior assignment, we looked at the Salish Sea from the perspective of a species that was pre-assigned. Now we're going to look at a few large themes, and then within that, you'll have a subsection or a sub-theme within that overall assignment. The idea is to create a timeline. There's a couple examples of timelines in the geography human population lecture, and I'll show a few more here. There are 4 major themes: orcas, climate impacts, salmon, and human population and growth. Within that, you'll see that you've been assigned a sub-theme. And so, for example, for orcas, live capture legislation. And so for that, you would want to look at the history of live capture of orcas. So when did that start? When were whales captured? Where did they go? How long is live whale or live orca whale capture happened? Where are those whales now? Could be part of the timeline. And then the rules and regulations around that. How is that different across the border? Did U.S. and Canada enact laws to stop live capture, and when did they do that, and what did that look like? So that should give you a fair amount to have, kind of easily 8 to 10 time points along that. Whale watching regulations, the same idea. And even with that, with whale watching regulations, I think it would be interesting to look at when did whale watching start, right? Like at a certain point in time, people started to pay money to go out on boats to look at whales. I don't know when that started, but I think that's obviously a precursor to regulations around whale watching, and then looking at those regulations on both sides of the border and how they've changed through time, including, as a helpful hint here, there's a number of, there's a couple state bills right now that are making their way through the Washington State Legislature around whale watching, and so that could be one thing to look at. In addition to the legal framework, maybe different ad campaigns or campaigns that have come out. Most recently, there's been a fair number around watching whales from shore as opposed to watching them from the water, and so that could be also included. Marine Mammal Protection Act's kind of a similar story. We can look at salmon. There's a couple examples, salmon fishing methods. So we've talked about reef nets, or reef nets are posted for the reef net lectures posted. Looking at reef nets is one example, looking at the indigenous ways of fishing, and then also how those fishing methods have changed through time. How sport fishing has changed through time, and how commercial fisheries have changed through time, as well as along with that, you could also look at the product that's created from that. So initially, from an indigenous perspective, fish were dried and stored, and there's different products that could be made from that. For the kind of settlers, initially salmon were salted and barreled, and then canning became possible, and then canned salmon became the main product of salmon. And then now, frequently, high-end troll-caught salmon is what you see a lot. So if you're going to go to a restaurant and spend $30 on a piece of salmon, you want a really nice, presentable piece of salmon. And that's different than the quality of salmon that would go into a can. Those can be beat up and kind of nasty, and doesn't really matter. So those fishing methods and also the market are sort of interrelated. And so kind of looking at that could be interesting. Human population growth, this drinking water, sewage, treatment infrastructures is an interesting one, looking at examples of how drinking water systems have been put in around the Salish Sea and the different ways that that's done. Seattle has the Cedar River watershed, so they've secured a large watershed that they protect and keep people out of as a way of having good, clean drinking water. You can find when those actually dams were put in for that in the early 1900s, I believe. And then obviously the Victoria issue has been a big one, with Victoria only having primary, or not even really primary, screened treatment for their sewage, meaning they just screen out the big bits, the plastic bits and things like that, and then eject the raw sewage in the Salish Sea. They now have a at least secondary treatment coming online, which treats the sewage further, reduces a lot of the organic matters. So those are a few kind of ways you could go with that. I'm not going to go through each one of these subtopics, but if you are kind of stuck and you want to talk through it, use that Calendly link and set up a time on Wednesday, or just send me a note. I can shoot out some ideas as well. So as with our 3 big assignments, this is worth 150 points, 40 points for the timeline. These can be hand drawn or digital, so you can just actually physically write it and draw it out, take a picture of that, insert it into your document, or upload it separately. That's totally fine. You should have a clear scale for the timeline. So if we're talking about whale watching, you're probably in the last 40 years, I would guess. Fishing methods, maybe you've got since time immemorial, and you can do a little jagged broken line and then come back to settler contact or colonization contact as a way of kind of dealing with that mismatch of a very long line, and then go forward from there if you wanted to. That'd be one way of dealing with it. Clear labels and dates. So you'll have your time points clearly stated on there, and a description that will be filled in also with your narrative essay. You'll have a compelling story about your theme in relation to the Salish Sea, told through the 5 points / periods of your timeline. And so kind of telling this, you're picking times in history and weaving them through a common narrative. And so if it's fishing methods, salmon fishing methods, and market, then you might have those two together, maybe some images of canned salmon from the early 1900s, and a bit about fish weirs, perhaps. Seeing where it ties in with the Salish Sea, and then a fair amount of points for all the 5 points or periods on the timeline described and explained. And so you can say our through theme is looking at orca whale capture. The first orca whale was captured at this date here, and then kind of continue on, but spend a fair amount of time describing those key 5 points on your timeline. One way to do that in your narrative essay would be to have sort of an introductory couple paragraphs, and then just bullet headers for each of your 5 points along your timeline, and then a couple paragraphs about that, ending with some connections between those timeline points. 10 points for the quality of sources and references for the data, 40 points for the quality of the writing, and then 20 points for your 4 references in APA, one of which has to be from the primary literature. This might be initially a little bit difficult, but I encourage you to search some of the primary literature and try to find something that relates to that. Again, and then also, because there's a group of you working on the same broader themes, there's a couple discussion groups here you can click on, and you can say, here's a couple points in time I found, and maybe some links to that to show students what that looks like. So you can share your sort of progress and what you're working on here as well. So I encourage you to use that to help maybe tie some of your themes together. Maybe there's overlap between Marine Mammal Protection Act, or if you're researching the Marine Mammal Protection Act and you find something about whale watching regulations, and you can just throw a quick post and link into that. And then following this link, we'll bring you an example timeline similar to the prior assignment, providing an example to work from. So I'm going to pull that up here. And again, APA formatting, header, title page, numbered pages, and then here's kind of the introductory to their overall timeline, citing a few sources here, citing a source, citing sources. I'll scroll down their timeline. This one is longer than I'm expecting. It's 7 pages. These references are not APA. Yours should be. So a note there. And this timeline is nice because it has sort of different colors to maybe denote different times. And this one's all about pipeline infrastructure in the Salish Sea. This timeline was created in PowerPoint, and then the student just saved it as a PowerPoint file. You can do that and upload it separately, so you can write your essay in a Word document and then create your timeline in a PowerPoint if you want. Just upload them both separately. I'll take a look at them. If you have the ability to print it to PDF, that works as well. But that's a pretty nice way of doing it. For me, that's probably what I would do, but that's because I lack the skills to do a neatly hand-drawn one. So that's entirely up to you. But you can see how here there's a number of the points are numbered. It says a little bit about it. And then these points in time are tied back into the narrative. So I hope that helps kind of describe what this looks like. This is the second of 3 assignments. The third one's a letter to a decision maker. So take a look at it. It takes a fair amount of research. It takes a fair amount of time and planning. And if you get kind of stuck on your topic, just drop me a note, and I'll try to get you heading in the right direction.